Our tips are back, of course, talking FF7, we're talking Rebirth. We're here to look at some more translations coming out of the Rebirth Ultimania. This one might be a little more interesting than yesterday's video, because I do know that we have like some part 3 kind of updates, kind of where they're at on that, and then I think also kind of like a release window, what they're shooting for in terms of when they want to drop the game. And then I'm sure other random bits of information regarding Rebirth, so let's hop into it. Actually, I'm just now seeing this for the first time as I'm hopping on to make the video, but Shinra Archaeology Department dropped a tweet yesterday that they were told to take down all their translations, which is kind of crazy. I don't think it's ever been a thing. I mean, I've been covering the remake project since its conception, right? Since it started getting shown in 2015. But like 2019 and on, like 2020 and shit, whenever the Ultimanias and shit were coming out, people have been translating that shit forever, dude. It's always been a thing. And I've never heard of that, where they're being told to take shit down. It also makes even less sense because Audrey still has her translations up. She's still actively doing translations today, a whole like day later, right? So I don't understand what that's about. And also, like, it's complete fucking bullshit, because they don't offer an English version upon release, right? We get the Japanese version, and we have to wait several months, a year. On some of these Ultimanias, we're still waiting on one from a couple years ago, like the Material Ultimania Plus or whatever, right? It's taking forever to get this shit in English. They don't offer a fucking English version. How do you expect us to get the information besides translations? I don't know who directly is making them like take down the translations. Obviously, it's Square Enix, but who, where, what department, who knows? I don't know. But it's absolute fucking bullshit. Maybe the difference between Shinra Arc and like Audrey is that I think she does more of like a summary of what's said in the Ultimanias, whereas Shinra Arc kind of does like a direct translation. So I guess there's like, I see in Audrey mentioned that there's like strict copyright rules and stuff in Japan, so that might be the reason why. I don't entirely know. I could keep going, I could keep ranting. We're just gonna call it quits there on that. We'll just, I guess, have to look at some of Audrey's translations today, which we're going to anyways. Let's hop right into it. Since profile says when he was younger and still learned to be a pilot, he often frequented the Shinra building. There's where he met Ifalna and young Aerith, and he recognized Aerith's likeness to Ifalna when they met again in adulthood and wanted to help her cause. Toriyama states this idea was borrowed from the FF7 Remake Traces to Past light novel, and Ojima created a scenario based on the possibility that two could have met in the past. So this is something I've actually seen people talk about. I think in the book it was, I think, a little ambiguous. Somebody had helped Ifalna when she's younger, or Ifalna and Aerith when Aerith was younger. Something along those lines, right? I don't know if we know who the person was, maybe we do. But somebody had mentioned, I'd seen that like is possibly Sid back in the day, and maybe that's what that is alluding to right there. I do want to say that too, on the idea of like Sid helping Aerith in the game, like him being kind of nice in the game. There's a little controversy for that, obviously, leading up to Rebirth in the trailers. We just seen like really nice Sid, and that mostly remains true. Some people defend it and say that he's still kind of an asshole, kind of a dick in the game at times. And he sort of is, but nowhere near to the degree that he is in the original FF7, right? It's a little jarring. I do like him being kind of nice because of the connection to Ifalna with Aerith and stuff like that. That's kind of fine, but I still wouldn't have minded seeing him be like a dick to other people. And maybe that could still happen in third game. When we get to Rocket Town, he could still be an asshole. I don't need him to be like full-blown piece of shit like he was to Shara in the original game, but that's just the Sid that we come to expect, at least when we first meet him, right? I don't need him to be that the whole FF7 Remake journey, right? But I just want to see like that Sid a bit, and hopefully we get more of that in the third game. Obviously, Audrey has a translation for like the Aerith's Fate stuff and kind of the end of the game shit that we talked about yesterday with Shinra Arc's translations. But she does have a follow-up where Nomura kind of comments on this, which is a little interesting. Nomura's comments on this, he mentions that many wanted to see Aerith avoid that fate in the OG for FF7 Rebirth. That's why the team delivered, having Cloud successfully deflect Sephiroth. There's a question that then asks why every time Cloud gets a headache with noise, he sees random flashbacks. Nomura says there's a lot of elements that go into this, but for now, all he can say is it represents Cloud's state of mind, rejecting those scenes from the flashbacks. Also to note, the follow-up Q&A to this is Nomura saying that Cloud and Zack's fight shows that two worlds are existing at the same time, and Sephiroth's existence can transcend multiple worlds, so it's all relative and up to interpretation. So as I do mention there, like, you do see Cloud deflect Sephiroth's attack in Rebirth. And at that moment, initially when I was playing the game, I was like, holy shit, did he just like actually save her? But then you obviously see the blood and all that other shit, and you see the group's reaction. So it's obviously, like, it's confirmed that she's dead. It's just a matter of what's going on with Cloud and Aerith. Like, we've talked about this a lot here lately, but, like, is he seeing, is it all in his head? Or is it like him seeing like another world where Aerith survived? Is that like a possibility too? Like he's seeing like a timeline or a world where he did deflect the blow and she's alive talking to him. The other group can't see that, maybe. Or is it just all in his head, right? Like, I don't entirely know there. Kind of weird to me how much they're trying to like push like the is she alive, is she not shit. Because at least for our group, the main party, in this world, Beagle World, she died. Like, look at the group's reaction, right? Look at the blood on the sword, the blood on the ground, the blood below Aerith. When we go into the Life Clinger fight, everybody has a limit break except Cloud because he's not accepting the truth, right? Like, come on. Like, she's dead. Now, is she alive in a different world? Maybe that's a possibility, I guess. But in our world, she's fucking dead. She died. I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like they're trying to have like that mystery and all that discussion they had whenever we got to the end of Remake, where the community's just buzzing and talking about all the different possibilities. And I just feel like we don't necessarily have that here as much, because it could be more obvious to me and most people out there that she's dead, in our world at least. Is she alive in another world? Can she come from another world alive to our world alive? Is that a possibility? Maybe. I don't know. Can she come back to life from the live stream? Possibly. Sephiroth did it. I don't know. I'm not saying she's got to be dead necessarily forever, or she's not alive in another timeline, because obviously she has different timelines. People can be alive in other timelines. We've seen them. The white material got pulled from another timeline to our timeline. It's possible, technically, I think, that you could grab somebody from another timeline, bring them to your world. I don't know why that couldn't work. I mean, I use the word timeline, worlds, interchangeably, whatever. Anyways, let's continue. There's a painting of Cosmo Canyon showing Nanaki when he is a baby cub, as well as a female cub, too. I've never noticed this painting. The female lion cub is from FF7 Before Crisis, and her name is Danae. She apparently is a childhood friend of his. So I definitely haven't seen that painting either, but to be fair, like, the game's massive, and I was trying to do as much as I could, but also finish the story at a certain point. So I wasn't walking around locations looking at, like, the minor details, like, in the background of locations, like, inside houses and shit like that, little paintings, pictures, things like that. Didn't really do that with my playthrough. I'm a little surprised that Audrey has never heard of Danae, I think that's how you say her name, because that's like some pretty basic like Before Crisis lore. I don't know a lot about Before Crisis. I know a decent amount, but I'm aware of like the female like version of Red 13, like his girlfriend or whatever. And I mean, at the end of OG FF7, he has kids, right? So there's obviously a female somewhere. Actually, looking at her replies, somebody took a picture of this painting, so that's kind of cool. This one's kind of interesting. Namor says in Ultimania that Glenn Lodbrok was originally a character made for the FF7 Rebirth story, who later then became the main character of FF7 Ever Crisis, the first soldier. Who exactly Glenn and the mystery Saruf is will be revealed in part 3. We know who Saruf is. Come on now. So that's obviously just kind of interesting, because we've only known of him to be involved with the first soldier stuff in Ever Crisis, obviously. But he was always meant to be a character for Rebirth. I wonder if his story is always meant to be the same. Was he always going to have this like past connection to Shinra and the kind of the first of the soldiers and shit like that, or whatever? The something Zero. I haven't played Ever Crisis in a while. I forgot what it was called. Whatever the team of him, Matt Lucia, was called, whatever that fucking was. The next several bits we're going to look at are in regards to Part 3, which is kind of like the main focus of this video, I would say, and a little bit about the remake project itself. Let's hop into it. Namor says in the Ultimania interview that he actually wanted to have FF7 Remake Part 2 be titled Reunion, but since that title went to Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, he couldn't use it for Part 2. He says he's not disclosed Part 3's title to anyone yet. So that right there is not actually news. We've actually read that before, verbatim, damn near, quite a while back, I would say, several months ago. Half a year, more than that probably, where Nomura or one of the devs had talked about wanting to call the second game Reunion, but Crisis Core kind of stole that sub-name, and that they weren't sure what they were going to call the third game, right? I think we've seen that all before, but I want to reiterate this because people still bring up the third game being called Reunion for some reason. That's not going to happen. Like, this just further proves that. Like, it was going to be used for the second game. It got used for Crisis Core, so they came up with something else, FF7 Rebirth. And they're not going to use Reunion for the third game if they weren't going to use it for the second game, right? So it's going to be a different RE word. Like, kind of the equivalent of if they were to, like, remaster, like, Dirge of Cerberus and call it, like, Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like, using that word again for some reason. Like, why would they use Reunion more than once? You can use the word remake because it's just the word remake, right? Like, Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't stealing from the remake project because it's just the goddamn word remake. Hamaguchi says in the FF7 Rebirth Ultimania that Part 3 should cover parts related to the OG, such as Icicle Inn and the Northern Crater, the Awakening of the Weapons, flying around in airships, etc. However, he is wondering how exactly to represent the freedom of flying in an airship with a game in such high graphic detail. He hopes to be able to bring something surprising to the experience, much like how Part 1 and Part 2 introduced new and exciting features as well. So that one's also kind of not new. We've definitely heard Hamaguchi voice his concerns in the past about like how they're going to do the airship when it comes to the third game. But it's kind of cool just to hear him talk about like Icicle Inn, Northern Crater, those locations. Kind of curious how they're going to handle those. Great Glacier is going to be a really interesting one. We're starting off a little bit slow here with like the Part 3 related stuff, but it's about to get interesting. Najima confirms there are indeed multiple worlds in the game, and that aspect of the story, along with the mystery surrounding Eris white material, will be made clear in FF7 Remake Part 3. In fact, he says he's almost done writing the main scenario for Part 3. There will be a tumultuous buildup of events leading to the ending, but he hopes that everyone looks forward to it. Toram also mentions that he hopes to bring an amazing conclusion for the world of Final Fantasy VII in Part 3. This interview was made February 2nd, 2024, so Najima should be done with the main story already. So initially that's pretty interesting because Nojima was close to finishing the main scenario for the third game as of February this year, but we do actually have a follow-up tweet to look at right after this where the main story is done now. I'm not sure what the difference was between the different interviews, because I think that one's Nomura, this one's Nojima and Toriyama. FF7 Remake, the main story, has already been completed, and Nomura thinks that we'll perhaps start voice recording in the near future. He remarks that Katase proposed an idea to him about something very important to include, even though it wasn't in the original game, and Nomura is pondering how to deliver. He thinks it will surely make people happy if they can do it well. Kitase hopes to deliver an amazing product for Part 3 without having to sacrifice quality over time. He says the reason why FF7 Rebirth was such an efficient development period was because they retained the same staff as the previous installment, and Part 3 will also have the same team. Kitase mentions FF7 Rebirth was actually done within 3 years, since about 1 year was developing the DLC, and he hopes to be able to stick with that schedule for Part 3 too. So that particular tweet's got just like a shitload of information. For one, the main story is already completed apparently, and then Nomura thinks that they might start voice recording in the very near future. It kind of comes down to when that interview was done with Nomura. Like, was this very, very recent before the Ultimania was done? Or was it like a month ago, 2 months ago? Because, you know, they might be very, very close at this point then to recording for the game. Which is the part where Nomura mentions that Kitase proposed an idea to him to add something very important to the third game that didn't exist in the original FF7, and that he hopes he can deliver with it, and if he can, it'll be great. What that is, who knows? Like, we can't possibly guess what that is, right? Because, I mean, what does that even mean? Unless he means showing a gratuitous sex scene between Cloud and Tifa, which, hell yeah. Then also have Kitase confirming that the same team that made Part 1 made Part 2, and then the same team making Part 3. That's not really a surprise, but it is good to hear. But it's really that last bit that's kind of the most important, is that they're shooting for a 3-year window on the third game, similar to what they did with Rebirth, right? And that if it wasn't for the DLC, which took them about a year to develop, maybe technically, I guess, that Rebirth would have been out last year if they didn't make that Yuffie DLC. It's absolutely perfect. Like, I'm fine with like a 3-year window. That's perfectly okay for me. Like, it gives them plenty of time to like develop the game. They have the majority of the world map obviously now because of Rebirth, but there's still some new like islands and continents and new locations to develop, of course. And obviously, they got to incorporate the Highwind into it all. But also, what's important is that puts it out in the 30-year anniversary, right? 2027 would be whenever FF7 original is 30 years old. It'd be kind of cool if they could actually get it out on January 31st. I mean, it's not really that far-fetched. I mean, the Rebirth wasn't that far off from the same day. It's literally like a month apart, right? Like, if they could, in theory, put out Rebirth on January 31st this year if they want to, I assume. It would be kind of cool if they could drop the third part, the final part of the remake trilogy, on the actual date that it released in Japan on January 31st, 2027. That'd be pretty damn cool. So this was pretty interesting too. Kitase has hopes that the world of Final Fantasy VII may continue on even after finishing the FF7 Remake project trilogy, but they need to wrap up Part 3 first and foremost. He thinks Part 3 will perhaps be his last involvement with the game in the FF7 series due to his age. In lieu of that, he wants to bring the trilogy to a close with hopes that Cloud and all the characters will be happy at the end. He wants to finish the trilogy on a positive note without leaving behind any unfinished business, but that's just his own personal opinion on the matter. So I've seen that bit be a little controversial because people want them to like put FF7 to rest for a bit or maybe forever, like because they obviously do a lot of FF7 related shit. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I like FF7, so I'm fine if they want to keep doing shit. I don't know what you do. You could do more books, you could do more animated movies in general, more games, whatever. I'm going to be interested at least a bit. I'm going to check it out, whatever it might be. I don't know what you do. There's plenty of other characters that are important. You don't even have to always follow the protagonist, right? There's all kinds of bad guys that have interesting stories and stuff, right? Or you could do a brand new character in the FF7 world, so on and so forth. There's just countless things you could do. Give us like a fucking prequel shit. Give me some like Genova Cetra shit back in the day. Give me a story on that. I want more of that shit. I will literally never ever say no to more FF7 stuff. I might not like everything they do totally. Like, you know, First Soldier, I didn't really care about too much. I played a little bit. It was all right. Ever Crisis was cool for a bit, but I haven't touched Ever Crisis in months. I think I haven't touched Ever Crisis since the FF9 crossover event or whatever. Like, that's the last time I played the game. It's been a little while. But I'm still going to check out whatever they put out, right? Anything FF7 related, I'm checking it out 100%. Also seemingly have Kitase confirming that Part 3 might be his last involvement with anything FF7, which kind of sucks. I mean, I like Kitase. I like all the devs. People have different opinions on each dev and shit. I like them all for the most part. I don't think I have like any negative opinion on anybody. So like, if Kitase's a part of it, like, I'm not going to complain. If he's not a part of it, I'm not really going to complain either. It's like, whatever. That's it for the video, my dudes. I've gone through all of Audrey's translations she's done since she started doing translations like a day or two ago. And we talked about everything that I think is worth talking about currently. There's some other smaller things we can maybe talk about in maybe another video at some point, potentially. But I kind of went through what I think is worth talking about with this video. Not really sure what we're going to do going forward in terms of, like, translations and shit, other than, I guess, Audrey, because I was kind of hoping to bounce off of her, but also Shinna Arc for information regarding Rebirth, but also the future and Part 3 and all that other shit, but might just be her going forward, I guess. Anyways, this video, my dudes. Subscribe to if you guys are new, so in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, _FYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.